Welcome to App Talk with Upptic, where we dig into the nitty-gritty of how to grow apps and games. We speak with industry experts about specific strategies, tools, and tactics they use to find success, and we keep you up to date with emerging news and trends in the ever-changing games, marketing, and technology ecosystem. My name is Xander Agosta, Director of Marketing today at Upptic, and joining me today are
Warren Woodward, co-founder of Upptic.
And we have a little bit of a mix-up. We have two guests this week, and we'll explain why in a little bit. Firstly,
hey, I'm Ian Brent. I'm the Web3 growth lead here at Upptic.
And
hey, I'm Kevin Wu. I'm a senior UA manager here at Upptic.
So we had a scheduling mishap this week. Someone decided to no-show, not to say who, but so we decided to do a scramble at the last minute and try a different angle. So we'll you'll see a little bit more about what this is going to be like towards the middle of the show, but basically we'll have our normal segments and we are going to have an interesting discussion about the current state of growth marketing towards the middle with some of our in-house experts. Is that a fair appraisal, Warren?
I don't want to make Kevin and Ian feel like they're second choice here.
So.
I mean, I think we've really wanted to like highlight our UA team for a while here and do a little more like, behind the scenes, like how the team actually operates, some of the strategies that are working. So I'm really glad that we had an excuse to have both of you guys on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Totally agree. Thanks. Yeah, so thank you, our mysterious guests, for canceling in order to highlight our team. Cool. Our first section is Industry Insights, where we do a deep dive in industry news. Since we missed last week, there's a lot of news that we have to cover, and we'll try and move quickly because we're sort of short on time. The first section is a section I'll call Tech Earnings, and I'll basically just group 3 articles together, and we can talk about them briefly. They're all CNBC articles, I believe. And the first one is Snap shares plunge 25% on disappointing second quarter results, plans to slow hiring. Just really quickly, Snap shares plummet more than 25% in extended trading on Thursday after the social media company reported disappointing second quarter results, missing top and bottom line. It also said it was planning to grow hiring as it reckons with weakening revenue growth. Second, Facebook parent Meta earning Q2 2022 earnings report. Facebook parent Meta reported a steeper than expected drop in revenue, missed on earnings, and issued a surprisingly weak forecast, pointing to second consecutive decline in year-over-year sales. Meta missed on the top and bottom line and gave troubling forecasts for the third quarter. And last but not least, Alphabet misses on earnings and revenue for second quarter. The company also fell short of revenue expectations for advertising Google Cloud. Can you see a trend here? So we have some metrics we can dig into, but I guess just quickly, first, let's throw it to the audience. What is the first take?
Well, yeah, I mean, just coming at it from a UA perspective too, like it's definitely been more challenging advertising with them. So I imagine from their end too, they're also seeing that advertisers are having a harder time across the board. Also means they're getting less revenue from our spend. So yeah.
And I guess like we can dig into this a little bit deeper. I think this is pretty clear, but from you guys' position, how much of this is macroeconomic conditions, which we know everyone's talking about, are we in a recession or not? And how much of this is just sort of the downstream effect of ATT? I guess what is the general appraisal and feeling on that?
My hot take here is, if there are certain industries that should be recession-proof, entertainment at large and gaming should be relatively recession-proof. While you're unemployed at home, you're still playing a game. So I don't think this is a macroeconomic situation. I think this is purely based on the limitations of ATT and how it has made it increasingly difficult to effectively advertise on those platforms, which is making the revenue go elsewhere.
I think there is one other factor at play here. I mean, everything that Kevin and Ian said is correct, but I do think we've touched on this a bit in the past. I mean, what powers the ad spend? I mean, the theme with all of these platforms is like they're driven by ad spend. Who is powering that? We know that a large segment of it is gaming companies, at least on the mobile side of things, and there has definitely been the other side of this coin is that there's been a ton of layoffs, companies shutting down, companies slashing their marketing spend in the mobile gaming space. So it's natural that I don't think that's the sole effect, but that's part of it. And it's all interconnected, because the other thing powering that, I think, is as the economy has gotten softer, there's less of a tolerance for unprofitable businesses. And a lot of these gaming companies, I think, have been spending unprofitably for some time, showing top line growth, but not showing true profitability. And, you know, as things tighten up in the economy, I think there's less tolerance for that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally agree with all the points you made. I think one interesting thing to call out is if you sort of look at all the different business segments, it's a bit of a mix as to why there were revenue missings and earnings misses across the different businesses. But I think the one thing that really stood out was that search for Google still grew very massively concurrently year over year, up $5 billion from this quarter last year to $40 billion. And the one thing about search is it is completely shielded from ATT. So as you're seeing this reckoning across all the different business units, across all these different companies who are, you know, very strongly levered to ad spend, one of the places you're still seeing profitable growth for that business is Google search. And so that is, I guess, like one point that this is at least partially, and I don't think there's really an argument anymore that this is not at least partially driven by ATT. One of the other things that we touched on, you know, Twitter also got crushed. We didn't really talk about it. Microsoft, we'll talk about it in the next segment, I think. Any other thoughts here before we move on?
I mean, I think our next piece is kind of tied to this, so maybe we can just fold into that. So up next, we had an article from GameIndustry.biz. It was just touching on the revenue trends in the gaming sector. So the headline is game spending down 10% to $26.3 billion in the first half of 2022. And for a little more context, U.S. consumer spending decreased 11% to $4.3 billion this June compared to the same period last year. NPD reported in its monthly charts, overall spending in the first half of 2022 reached $26.3 billion, a 10% drop year on year, with subscription being the only category experiencing growth compared to 2021. Hardware-wise, sales dropped 8% year on year, June to $371 million, and declined 9% through the first half of the year to $2.1 billion. So we've been covering, I think there's been like some version of this article on some part of the gaming sector for a while now on this season of the podcast. So this is just like our weekly doom and gloom piece. I see these numbers, like I'm not really ringing alarm bells for me. Like we touched on some of this. For me, it's like we have inflation. We have our first kind of summer that's a return to the real world. And I think another factor is just a lot of the heat in gaming investment has moved to the Web3 space. So it's just like a combo of a number of stacking factors. I don't know, like these numbers are more focused on the PC and console side. So I'm curious, guys, like outside of some other factors we talked about, do you see any other things that would specifically impact like PC and console gaming?
I mean, well, you first, Andrew. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think from my side, I see a lot of console gaming as benefiting from mobile tech and kind of where mobile advertising has been headed. You know, in terms of measurement, in terms of sort of the granularity of targeting, or like at least the desire to. And so, you know, we've been working a lot more with partners who have PC titles, console titles, and I think that, you know, the smaller the partner is, the more likely they are to benefit from that advertising. I think we're probably seeing a lot of also like brand advertising, big brand advertising fall off, as like you said, Warren, you know, general macroeconomic trends are pushing people away from staying at home and just gaming. But to caveat that, to say, like, you know, for those smaller teams that aren't doing big brand buys, I think there's still a place for marketing spend to grow. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. I think it's just who are the big players and where are they dumping all their money. Yeah, like, you know, thinking about all the conventions that don't happen and, you know, brand advertising that kind of happens around those, or like big YouTube homepage takeovers, whatever, like I think those are definitely starting to drop off a little bit.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing here is it's got to be like year-over-year comps, right? Because you're just basically competing with their most aggressive year ever. The other thing is these numbers, we don't have the NPD report. You have to pay for it. We didn't pay for it. So it's hard. I didn't get really a chance to really dig deep down into the report, but it didn't look like these numbers included the mobile games. And so for that reason, I'm really curious to see how the big game companies do when they report earnings next week. You know, Activision, Blizzard, EA, Take-Two. I'm keeping an eye on those guys. Cool. Let's keep going. Another big piece of news which we missed because we've been off since last week, but this is Netflix. This is, I believe, a Netflix.com, Netflix.com blog article. And the blog article is Netflix to partner with Microsoft on new ad-supported subscription plan. Here's a little quote. In April, we announced that we will, this is from the perspective of Netflix. In April, we announced that we will introduce a new lower priced ad-supported subscription plan for consumers, in addition to our existing ad-free basic and standard premium plans. Today, we are pleased to announce that we have selected Microsoft as our global advertising technology and sales partner. Microsoft has proven ability to support all our advertising needs as we work together to build a new ad-supported offering. More importantly, Microsoft offered flexibility to innovate over time on both technology and sales, as well as strong privacy protections for our members. So this is a pretty big deal, I think. It's sort of a dark horse Microsoft winning the lot, because I don't think anyone really expected this coming. I think the main thing is Netflix gets to accelerate their path towards offering a lower cost tier to their customers, and during the period which they've had the highest churn ever. So they had almost 1 million subscribers churn during the most recent quarter. And then conversely, Microsoft gets a massive amount of exclusive inventory to kickstart their advertising business, which is really, really critical, I think. And the other component of this is that Microsoft doesn't produce a consumer-facing video content like most of the other people who would be potentially vying for this slot this contract would be. And so I think that's another really, really big compelling reason why Microsoft went with Netflix. But I think most importantly, out of all of this, is the Microsoft ads product is called Xandr, and that's really what we should be focusing on here. And what do you guys think?
Great name.
There's a lot to unpack here. One thing that I'm thinking about is, what is the amount of cannibalization to the current customer base that's going to happen? An interesting, yeah, for Netflix introducing that ad-supported plan. One parallel story I think would be good to watch here is Amazon's approach. So they recently, rebranded and essentially relaunched their ad revenue-driven streaming service Freevee, but Amazon took a very different approach where you have Prime Video as a premium product that requires Prime subscription, and then Freevee is accessible to anyone, just ad supported, but they're different content pools catered to different demographics. Netflix model is, I think, riskier and more likely to have cannibalization because at the end of the day, you're getting the same product. So for those less frequent consumers of Netflix content, are they more likely to downgrade to the ad-supported model? And I'm just curious, obviously it opens up a customer base they don't have before, but that can outweigh the amount of people that downgrade that are not frequent streamers.
So there's one data point which we didn't touch on that I think is justification for why they're doing this. And that's if you look at Hulu's numbers, their ad-supported tier, their bottom tier, makes more ARPU, more revenue per user than their cheapest paid tier. And so what I think what the Netflix thesis is here is that they're actually gonna be able to capture more revenue because of the amount of revenue that the ads are going to drive. And so they actually are fine with you downgrading, or if as they start kicking people off their parents' accounts, which is something they've also talked about doing, this is a way to sort of capture incremental revenue from those users, and then potentially those are actually higher revenue users on the upside because of their ad users. Well, it has to go right for that thesis to bear out, but I think that is another thing we should consider.
Yeah, I'm not much of a Netflix user, so I'm curious to know how much the user behavior differs between each of those three streaming platforms. And obviously that's not a question that I think any of them really would know either, but Hulu, traditionally, I remember it being a lot more TV show driven. I know Netflix has quite a lot of TV content as well. But with it being so TV driven, I'm curious if that means that there's just extended content, natural places for ads to be, versus Netflix. Like I heard Stranger Things season 4, spoiler alert, has like 1.5 hour, 2 hour long episodes. And if you're going to drop an advertisement in the middle of that, how much is that going to affect your users' ad experience or just their general product experience? And would that convince them to remain on that ad supported the model, the plan?
Yeah. Ian, Kevin, do you guys see like an emerging UA opportunity specifically because Microsoft is powering this, and while they're not the biggest name for mobile UA, Microsoft does have a background of mechanisms for performance marketing?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great call out. But the huge red flag in that statement that you read off, Xander, said something about while really considering the privacy of our users. And like, you know, if you take the Brave browser approach, you make it so you can't run UA. So like, I wonder what their solution is there. And, you know, I'd be shocked if they went the Brave browser approach, but you know, even you know, ATT being a use case in making it more difficult to attribute users makes it so it's more difficult to spend there. If they value the privacy of their consumers too much, they're going to drive ad dollars away. So I think it'd be a super interesting opportunity if the opportunity to properly track and attribute users is there.
Yeah,
that's
sorry, I think one other thing to add, just on the flip side, even though, you know, there are some clear potential downsides to using a platform that is, or like from the advertising side, that is so gung-ho about privacy. On the flip side, when it comes to Netflix versus other, say, TV type ad vendors out there, I think Netflix has a much better understanding of its audience and also its content. If you were to buy on TV, you're kind of hoping that the people are watching a specific genre, or, you know, you're trying to find that. But with Netflix, you have way better ability to target the content that you're looking for and do audience matching. So I think it's definitely more interesting to me than a lot of the other TV options that are out there. But as Ian said, the biggest challenge is a privacy bar. It would pretty much put it on the level with TV if we had like no access to understanding users, just like an impression count, but definitely interesting still.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if that's actually what it is. I mean, the thing you have to think about is these are two of the biggest walled gardens with understandings of their user bases, really deep understandings of their user bases. And the question is, if they could sort of match their data set somehow, which is, you know, technically possible, you could do really, really interesting granular targeting. And now whether or not that is what they do at the beginning, that's definitely what they're going to be doing aspirationally. And, you know, these are smart companies. I would not bet against either of these companies in the long term. So I have a feeling over the long term, this is going to make out to be fairly successful. The one thing just to call out, it's like, this is the first time that Netflix is like ceding ground to another tech company. Like their whole thing forever is they've been so small, so nimble. They're the ones, they build it in house. They do it they do it better than anyone else. And now they've become such a big behemoth. They're actually outsourcing a bunch of like the really critical business component of the value chain to Microsoft, which is like so not what they've done historically. It's just interesting to watch that business mature, I guess. Okay, let's keep moving because we still got a lot to cover.
Yeah, let's go. Up next, Elon Musk says Tesla is integrating Steam gaming marketplace into its cars. We'll link to an article from Fortune. So for a quick quote, Elon Musk is again promising to make the Tesla car into a gaming device. On Saturday, the Tesla CEO tweeted that Steam, the world's most popular digital storefront for PC games, would be integrated into Tesla cars. Quoted as saying, "We're making progress with the Steam integration." Musk tweeted in response to a fan account's praise of the video game playing capabilities of a Tesla car. And he also said demo is probably next month. So for those unaware, Tesla already has a roster of around 20 games that you can play today. This includes more casual games like Fallout Shelter, the things like Stardew Valley and The Witcher 3. And yeah, they do have the goal now of integrating all of Steam, which is super interesting. I have as a note here, if everyone is sick of me talking about Web3 gaming this year, just wait till next year when you get sick of me talking about in-vehicle gaming, as I think we approach the autonomous driving era, because I do think that'll be the next big emerging platform. So I think this is surprising, but not necessarily bad. I kind of expected that Tesla would focus more on like a first-party app store, but they're juggling so many different things that they're working on. I don't think it's a bad decision to make this partnership with Steam. I could see them like cutting them out once they get enough learnings about it and launching a first-party storefront. I don't know. What do you guys think about this move from Tesla, and just sort of your thoughts on that potential emerging sector of in-vehicle gaming?
Yeah, I love the idea. I just think it reminds me of some like OEM stuff that we get on mobile too, for better or for worse, like, or a digital turbine. I think there's definitely going to be a play there in the years to come. I will say, like, I couldn't imagine playing a lot of the games that I play on Steam on the Tesla. So if it came with like controllers or something, then I would 100% be in. like if those are on board. But you know, even without that, if we're playing like some basic touchscreen stuff, I think there's still a whole world of gaming out there. I hope that that's also exciting news for, you know, a lot of indie developers. I know Steam is where I usually have been finding a lot of specials for indie gaming and just kind of trying out a whole bunch of new products. And so I think a lot of those would work well on the touchscreen or just the screen that the Tesla does have. So that's super exciting.
Pardon my autonomous vehicle ignorance here, but Warren, as our resident Tesla expert, what are the current like regulations about like having to have direct oversight of the car as it's in autopilot?
I'm not an expert on the regulations, but even for Tesla themselves, they have the beta of autonomous driving that's live today, but just for pure safety and acknowledging that it's in a beta, they don't let you take your hand off the wheel for, you know, more than a few moments at a time.
Right.
So I think this is still a ways off, because there's the first and foremost just safety and quality of the product of autonomous driving, but secondly that regulation phase. So I think, yeah, the full realization of this is still some years off, but I do think that it's a clear path to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy to dunk on Elon. So many people, it's just like the popular thing to do is just say that Elon's an idiot and everything he's talking about is an idiot, which is hilarious because of how successful he's been. But this makes so much sense. I was listening to some other, let's say, famous, you know, well-known industry podcasts, and they were like, I don't understand how this could possibly be a thing. And like, to me, I don't understand how you could possibly think this is not a thing. I mean, like, it's obvious that at some point in the future, there will be self-driving cars. And it's obvious that at some point in the future, we're still going to want to drive. And what are you going to do when you're sitting in the car? I mean, like, it's the most obvious, it's one of the most long-term obvious opportunities for games growth. I mean, this is like way more obvious to me than the metaverse. So, I mean, it seems awesome. It's a ways out. You know, it's really easy to say this is a stupid idea, but it seems like an obviously really good idea over time. That's my take, at least.
It's great for passengers right now. Like, even if the driver can't play, if you have a full car, like, you could still, you know, have people engaged with that. You'd have to GPS on your phone instead, but I think that's a worthwhile sacrifice.
Well, yeah, and you can do like LAN parties in the car. That sounds great. All right, moving on.
All right, we got one more today. This was an interesting one. This is from Kotaku. It's a pair of articles on the same subject. We have one first from Kotaku, second from Forbes. First one is Minecraft bans NFTs and blockchain, which do not align with games values. That's from Kotaku. And then the related article, NFT Worlds Shunned by Minecraft says it will build its own Minecraft with blockchain and creators. So for a little more context, here's a quote from the first piece. In our Minecraft usage guidelines, we outline how a server owner can charge for access and that all players should have access to the same functionality. We have these rules to ensure that Minecraft remains a community where everyone has access to the same content. NFTs, however, can create models of scarcity and exclusion that conflict with our guidelines and the spirit of Minecraft. To ensure that Minecraft players have a safe and inclusive experience, blockchain technology companies are not permitted to integrate inside our client and server applications, nor may Minecraft in-game content such as worlds, skins, persona items, or other mods be utilized by blockchain technology to create a scarce digital asset. Cool. So I just want to kind of zoom out and give a little more context here. There's been a number of large-scale Web3 or quote unquote metaverse projects that are just layers or things built on top of Minecraft using different kinds of ownable assets. So this ties to the second article around this project, NFT Worlds, that was basically a pretty large scale metaverse project built on top of Minecraft that's now just lost its whole foundation with this change of policy. So the second article from Forbes has a quote from NFT Worlds where they said, "We're creating a new game and platform based on many of the core mechanics of Minecraft, but with monetization and active development, Minecraft has been missing for years. This is not a rewrite of some open source Minecraft clone, which would likely violate the EULA or risk legal action, entirely new from the ground up. While the playstyle, look and feel will be very familiar to Minecraft players, the game mechanics, graphics, performance optimizations, and overall improvements will usher in more accessible, ownable, and enjoyable playing experience. Best of all, we're completely untethered from the policy enforcement from Microsoft and Mojang have over Minecraft. We truly become our own open game and platform. So they're trying to position that this is really a good thing, that they've just lost their entire game engine and it's actually going to be better for them in the long run. So curious if you guys have tracked any of these like metaverse projects that are built on top of Minecraft or other sort of centralized metaverses, and what do you think about this whole drama of Minecraft blocking any sort of third-party ownable assets or NFTs?
I think it's kind of strange, knowing that a lot of Minecraft servers out there are also kind of like mobile games. Like some of them are pay to win. They have their own version of like competition and scarcity there. I'd be curious to like hear a little bit more from them about what exactly, like vision wise, they thought would conflict with Minecraft. But I actually, I thought it made a lot of sense if they had all of these third-party developers who are going to help build all this tech for them, then they could be the ones to like feel it out, maybe spin off like a business segment to just deal with, what's the potential growth of just this segment, right? You have so much interest in building on top of your already strong framework. You could probably take advantage of all the extra man hours you have and then still get royalties at the end of the day for people using your platform. And then on the flip side, I would just say like, I think it's it's cool that NFT Worlds wants to like build their own Minecraft, but Minecraft is a team building Minecraft, and
Right.
it's like it's going to be like probably the most optimized, like like people are the best at just doing that at the Mojang, at the Minecraft Microsoft team.
You don't think someone can just like whip up Minecraft in a couple of weeks and as a better version?
From personal experience, no, I don't think so.
And that's the funniest part, is there's so many of these Web3 projects we're just like, oh, we're just going to do this, but Web3, not realizing how hard it is to actually develop these really, really successful projects. I mean, I think it is a little strange as well. I mean, you sort of said royalties at one point in what you're describing, and I think that's sort of the key, is they think that it's going to spin out of control. They're not going to be able to monetize it, I think, is maybe what they're worried about. But that being said, it's like you always have, if they're building on top of your platform, you always have the leverage, right? You can go to these guys down the line and say, hey, listen, you got to cut us in, otherwise we're going to pull the platform. And then they're kind of over a barrel. And it just seems like a very strange way, time to be pulling yourself out of the value chain. I think they're just like, I think this smells bad. And so they're just like, someone high up the food chain is like, this is not in our interest. We don't want to be associated with this. Forget about it. But it does seem like sort of a strategic blunder. I'm not really sure if it makes a lot of sense for them.
Yeah, this is their opportunity to be like the App Store or the Play Store.
Yeah, and it's like Roblox is basically doing exactly what they're doing, except for it's just not on the blockchain. Like exactly what's happening in Minecraft is happening on Roblox, but it's just a completely closed walled garden ecosystem. And so it's like clearly there's an appetite for literally block-based metaverses. I don't know why you just be like take yourself out of the running as being the preeminent one. But
yeah, I mean, I think there's, Kevin identified that all of the platforms are basically, and Minecraft essentially is a platform now. Like they're at a crossroads where they can do one of two things. One, because this doesn't fit into existing business models because of the economics of who owns what in blockchain games and how that revenue is passed around. So they have to do one of two things. As Kevin said, they can say, oh, this is a new opportunity. Let's build out a business division working with these projects, adapt our technology to where we build a reasonable revenue sharing model with these projects. Or they can just say, it's a threat. We're not making money off it right now. Sure sounds like all of our players really hate NFTs right now. This is not worth dealing with. Just burn it down. And I think with current market sentiment, we're going to see a lot less of that. I know some of the platforms we talked to for our Web3 games have been a little slower to return our phone calls since the the market downturn. So not too surprised to see this.
Cool. Well, let us move on from the industry insights to our main segment, where we'll be talking about the state of games marketing. Kind of got a lot of angles to go in here, and we'll just sort of open it up as a roundtable. I'll ask some questions and you guys can answer as you feel is most appropriate. Let's just start with the highest level, and we'll start with mobile, but then we'll sort of pivot to Web3. So just first and foremost, what are your highest level appraisal of the current state of mobile games advertising?
Like, what are some of the big trends you guys are seeing right now in your day-to-day in the trenches?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I know, Xander, you just said that we'll visit Web3 in a second, but I am deep in the Web3 weeds on a daily basis. So that is my holistic perspective right now. And so mobile advertising for Web3 does not exist except for advertising on web on mobile. And the Google Play Store and iOS App Store are going to be very slow to take it up. That is coloring my whole perspective of mobile advertising in general. It's also made it so, we're getting creative with how to run web marketing campaigns for Android APK. And, we're evaluating how to spin up campaigns for the Samsung App Store. And so getting creative to solve for iOS App Store and Google Play Store being very slow. Other than that, I would just say general observations of, where Facebook was the dominant space to spend money, that money is going elsewhere. Seeing some interesting trends with SDK ad networks getting better at their optimized campaigns. Recently we've seen a lot of success on Unity where we hadn't previously. So that was a number of things, but there you go. Hot take, done.
Great. Yeah. I mean, I think that's all really insightful. Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit? You're like a little more deep in the sort of traditional mobile space. Want to give us some insight what you're seeing there?
Yeah, so kind of building off of what Ian was saying, Facebook not being super strong lately, and the SDK networks starting to get a little bit better. I think it all stems from when Google launched the Universal App Campaign years ago. I mean, you don't know what y'all have talked about on the podcast previously, but yeah, there's just this loss of targeting options for advertisers and the loss of the ability for us to kind of avoid competition. To top it off, I think the app ecosystem is just more competitive than it was, 5 years ago. Like in the past, you had like maybe 4 or 5 really huge games that would be spending a lot, and there were mechanisms that you could use to get around that, buy on the inventory that you still want to buy on and still find profitability even with a smaller title. But nowadays, with the combination of, well, there's like 20, 25 huge games or major developers that are spending on those games, and then we're all being funneled into one pool of inventory for every single network, where like UAC or now App Campaigns is just pushing everybody against each other. Facebook has kind of been doing that with AAA. The SDK networks with their ROAS bidders, they bid on person, not on inventory. So you can't avoid by finding the same people on the other apps they use. You have to bid on those people across all of the apps, and that just raises the price for each of those payers or each of those users, no matter where you buy them. So just there's been more of advertisers at the mercy of the networks, which is radically different from how it was when I started in the space.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. So you guys talked a lot about the different pain that you have been feeling. My question is, let's sort of like flip this on its head. What are the most interesting tactics or channels or combinations of creative tactics and channels that you're actually seeing outside success on right now compared to the market overall, which you described as somewhat scary?
Yeah, sure. I'll just continue off of that one. I think we have so much creative leverage these days as opposed to UA leverage. Really, it's that happy marriage of the UA team and creative teams, and being able to identify for any particular network, oh, hey, this seems to be resonating more, this seems to be resonating less. And although we want to treat it like a science, it's definitely an art. You can go super granular, be like, hey, there's a candle in this one video, like that candle's the reason this video took off. Or just trying to look at it more holistically from a value prop perspective. And so I think advertisers have to just be a little bit more savvy. You can't be as data driven as you used to be able to, but you can still make really informed decisions. And so we've seen a lot of success with partners who are willing to go deep with us on creative production and kind of on best practices there, which has been really exciting. It's just a different version of the ecosystem than it used to be.
Following on some of Kevin's sentiments there, I think Kevin touched on an important word there, which is like holistic marketing. One thing that we find ourselves like talking to, our current partners or potential partners at Upptic is just some version of essentially like, you can't UA optimize your way out of this situation, like as the sole lever. As targeting mechanisms and data granularity have become less available on mobile, we have all had it. If we want to do our jobs well, we really need to transition to thinking more as holistic marketers. And for us, like we'll not even take on engagements anymore if it's just like, we just want you guys to come in and run the Facebook campaigns, because a lot of times the correct answer for what should I be doing with my Facebook campaigns is, well, you should just be turning them off and doing something else instead. So I think the more holistic you can be going in your marketing approach right now, more that you can be working cross-disciplinary with a creative team and with data science teams, I think that's going to lead to more optimal outcomes.
Yeah, just to really quickly piggyback on that, the holistic view of UA means from the very top of the funnel to the very bottom of the funnel. So the creative is solving for the top of the funnel where you're getting people to click on the ads. And then another big thing we focus on is how to improve the conversion rates when they actually get to the App Store. So the App Store optimization improves the conversions there. And then, obviously then we're optimizing towards in-app results to figure out where to funnel spend. But all as the targeting gets less specific to which users you show it to, the opportunities to convert users from impression to install really raises the needle. So
yeah, that'll make sense. So I kind of want to get a little bit tactical, and I want to talk about, you guys each run your own clients, as well as you have visibility into some of the other clients that we work with really closely. What is the general split across buckets of channels? So if we take this look at like social as one bucket, SDK/word of video, search, influencer, other, how do you guys, are you seeing across the portfolio, how are you seeing different buckets as a, like which buckets are winning the most? And then within different specific clients, are there differentiations from the overall theme?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely varies from client to client, but I'd say at minimum, social. I mean, if you were including, especially if you include like Google as a part of it, or unless you're splitting that out separately as search. So if you account for all,
let's just call Google.
Okay, let's call Google. That makes much more sense in my brain. So social is roughly, a third to a half. Google is roughly, a third, and then rewarded video takes up the rest, minus 1%, and then 1% goes to random stuff like influencers or other things like that. I mean, yeah, varies greatly from client to client, but I mean, SDK ad networks, I don't think ever take up more than a third for the most part. And yeah, and Kevin, you can probably speak to this in more detail, but I feel like Google has taken over a lot of the Facebook spend that goes from Facebook to other channels. I mean, I guess the rewarded networks as well, but.
Yeah, I think there is definitely something to be said for how Google has remained pretty consistent, especially on the Android side. I think, if we're splitting Google into Google, I mean, Google Android is its own thing and Google iOS is off for most of our partners. I will say that generally the pattern for the split is very dependent on the life cycle or the place that the game is in its life cycle. We find that the earlier the game is in its life cycle, the younger it is, the more social networks we're using. And then the later on in the game's life cycle, the more SDK and then experimental channels we're using. I think the main thing is that with social, you view it as one large inventory pool that you are slowly depleting over time. And with rewarded video networks, a lot of times you're optimizing to get to a place where you have the right pub mix, or I guess with the ROAS bidder and the optimizations on the network side, getting them optimized, learned enough to then be able to succeed. So there's an initial learning curve to getting us to profitability. And so the older the game is in its life cycle, the more data a lot of those SDK networks have. And because we don't have the targeting options on the social side anymore to be able to keep up with that, we kind of see there is some point where the spends will intersect and SDK will start taking over more of the portfolio than social. And as for the last few, like Ian said, we would never really launch straight out the gate with a huge influencer channel burst. I don't think it's like inappropriate necessarily. It's just not right for the titles that we work on, but it could work for other folks out there for sure. It's just that for us, we view those as experimental channels that we'll tack on as we go on.
Two other high level trends I want to call out while we're touching on this section. One is just the general eCPM trends of the last. Just before this call, I was just looking at the last 9 months and pretty clear inverse trends of eCPMs continuing to go down on iOS, which is like a sentence that we probably never thought we'd be saying a few years ago, and essentially staying pretty high on Android with some leveling off recently. That's, I think, one important trend to call out. And then another one, as far as like channel mix, it's clear that TikTok has gotten a lot more consumer adoption, but a lot more marketer adoption as well on both iOS and Android. Just a clear like 45-degree angle that I was seeing for eCPMs on TikTok as it becomes more widely adopted. It was like the worst kept secret for performance like a year ago, and now it's just kind of getting to be more like Facebook was a couple years ago as far as level of competition.
That makes a lot of sense. You sort of preempted my exact question, which was like the elephant in the room is Facebook to TikTok, and so are you basically seeing that how pronounced is that flight? Because that's something that's like a narrative that we hear if you listen to any read, listen to whatever. How much is the Facebook to TikTok flight realized in the data when you guys look at the portfolio?
I mean, I know we definitely have games where we've turned Facebook off and kept TikTok running and scaling, which is a pretty unexpected trend, again, if you were to forecast a couple years ago to now.
Yeah, and that's all purely based off of returns too. So
right.
It's driven by just where those networks are actually at. I think there's probably like on average 50% of our original Facebook spend is going to TikTok. That's just a ballpark, but I think it could be even more than that. The flight's real for sure.
And so this will sort of segue into our next topic, but how much of this is Facebook being sans and therefore being unable to do probabilistic attribution, and TikTok still being able to do probabilistic attribution versus a different phenomenon?
I think that's a big part of it for iOS, especially, but we still do see better performance on TikTok Android than Facebook Android. So it's not uniquely related to that, but I do think that's a big reason why we are able to more healthily spend on the TikTok iOS side.
Okay, so let's extrapolate that out. And we know this is a topic that's been beat to death, but I think it's really important for marketers who are thinking about the state of mobile marketer and games marketing in general today to really understand the transition and what you can do today. So we know that ATT has affected efficacy of marketing, and SKAN has been adopted in some limited capacity. Sort of, how has the intelligent mobile marketer, or I guess like there's two parts of this question. How is the intelligent mobile marketer adapted to SKAN, or sorry, ATT and SKAN in a way that allows you to continue buying? And then sort of separately but important is SKAN worth, to what extent is SKAN worth even paying attention to at this point?
So I just came out of another podcast, shout out to Joseph Kim, where we dug pretty heavy into this. So I just want to quickly mention two things. When SKAN hit, I think, I'm super proud of how our team innovated here in the solutions we found for SKAN. We're spending a lot more on iOS now than Android, which I think is an exception in the industry. But reflecting on it, I think we had to. For us being, ultimately companies are hiring Upptic to add profitable growth to their ecosystem. So if we can't do that, we are out of a job, if we can't provide that incremental profitability. So I think we were uniquely incentivized to find something that works for our own livelihood. And I didn't really think about it that way till kind of like having historical perspective. So our team really kind of took a step back and was like, how can we work with this situation? And the analogy that I made on Joseph's podcast earlier was, it's like, imagine that you wake up in a prison cell, and that prison cell is this new privacy-centric era, and Apple's like, hey, here's a chisel. And so everyone's natural reaction was like, all right, we're going to just start chiseling out of this prison cell and just grinding away, trying to chisel out of this prison cell. Meanwhile, no one really took a look around to see hey, is maybe the door unlocked, or is there a key under this mat? And I think that's kind of the approach our team took. And without getting too into specifics, finding ways to work around SKAN rather than utilizing this half-baked system has really, I think, been key to the success for Kevin, Ian, and the rest of our team here at Upptic.
It's a really great metaphor. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say it's like, SKAN is the chisel, and we just like investigated the chisel closely and realized that there was a key attached to the end of the chisel, and then we used that to unlock the door because it's interrelated. But yeah, no, we weren't just blunt force pounding away at the concrete as our solution. And yeah, without boring our guests to tears with the details there, coming up with some high-level methodology of how to use the SKAN data we're receiving to extrapolate what we should be seeing from the mobile measurement partner standpoint. Let us make effective decisions based on a limited set of data, which put us in a great position. And
and to add on, I think when SKAN was first being announced, there was so much talk about how we can use the conversion values, like what's the optimal setup, and most of our partners don't have that because one, it's really difficult and time intensive from a dev perspective to get set up and to make it all work. But even when it has been set up and verified, we've worked with partners where the data doesn't show what you expect it to show, in that when you don't pass back certain conversion values, they still pass because either they're not being updated in time, like there's something up with the actual SKAN technology itself that prevents accurate data keeping, and that's a huge blocker to us actually being able to use it effectively. So it was like, to just the chisel metaphor, like turned out it wasn't like a steel chisel or anything, it was like wooden. Yeah, so it's been tough for us, I think, to find that key and figure out exactly what the methodology should be in place of using this established narrative. But yeah, where we're at right now, I think is much healthier and much more sustainable than having to rely on what is a finicky system right now. And I do know there is a new version of SKAN that's coming out. We'll see if that comes with like improvements to that tech piece. But the dream would be to get attributed anything data from SKAN. So if that's some form of conversion value, that's better than what we have right now to be able to make decisions and predict things. So whatever extra data we can get is good.
Yeah, I mean, we did a brief dive into SKAN 4.0, which is the new version of SKAN. Conceptually, they've done a lot. And so, we'll probably do an episode in the coming months about like how good SKAN 4.0 actually is. I think realistically, there's a fair amount of adoption from the ecosystem before that's going to be realized. Okay, sort of wrapping up, I want to take a sort of another step back and think about the future of marketing. And one thing that I think is a common prevailing wisdom is that MMPs are going to continue to degrade in efficacy over time. And one of the solutions that has been used in the past for other forms of marketing and is now being more often applied to UA is mixed media modeling. So I want to open this up to the floor and say, to what extent have we used mixed media modeling, and to what extent do we see mixed media modeling as a potential lever for user acquisition growth going forward?
Yeah, I think mixed media modeling is not it's not really a long-term solution for mobile. The way I see it is it's a more complex version of our current organic uplift studies, which rely a lot on deep funnel data being sent back to us, right? And our ability to predict user engagement from organics as a result of UA activity. Like mixed media modeling to me feels you need to have so much more data, like probably years of data, in order to avoid seasonality. You're also worrying about the fact that there's a non-linear relationship between spend and installs, let's say, or spend and revenue even. And so you need to get data points for every single one of your networks at every single spend band along the way. There's just so much that you have to parse through, and there is so much noise day to day. Even when you do this organic uplift studies, we've seen that the amount of noise can sometimes eclipse the amount of uplift changes day to day. And so the scale of what we're talking about in terms of measurability is really difficult, even for companies that have a good amount of budget to spend. And so you're really limiting this to only the largest players in the space, who then also have the most complex set of needs because they have the most networks and the most geos and all that. So I think it just becomes more of a complicated analytics task, and it just has this huge bloat and overhead that is not really a good fit for mobile But I think we can take learnings from some of the analysis there. I just don't view it as something that would be the best practice in solutions for our industry.
Very quickly on my end, I historically I've had a pretty cynical view as far as like the not that media mix modeling doesn't work or have value, but that it can be a core decision-making factor for the day-to-day of UA work. That's kind of been where the application of it falls short for me. I do think that the space is maturing, and there's smart teams out there like MetricWorks that are bringing more advanced products. And I'm starting to view it now more as part of a tool set for building the optimal buying models, but not sort of like the end state or the primary thing that you're using for your day-to-day optimization decisions. But I think the perfect predictive buying models probably have elements of MMM feeding into them.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of really, really solid content in a very, very short period of time. So thank you guys all very much for joining us for that segment. Let's transition to our last segment, which is App of the Week. We'll start with Warren because he's an expert at this. Warren, do you have an app this week?
Yeah, my app this week is one that you can't try quite yet, and it's kind of a weird one, but you'll be able to next week. So one of the teams that we work with is a developer called Arrivant, a really awesome team. And while their full game is not out, they are launching. Ian is thumbs downing because I stole the app he should have used. But they're basically launching their onboarding, gamified onboarding next week. And so their gaming universe is called Project Elune, and what they're launching is called Mission Control. And it's basically like a gamified onboarding system for their, the different games in their universe, and you get to build out your digital identity. So without going too in the weeds, you basically can unlock what's called a soul-bound NFT. This is something that you can't trade, that kind of reflects your reputation in the game ecosystem and what you've achieved. And you can basically onboard yourself, learn about the game, learn about the founders, earning experience, improving your soulbound NFT, and also earning assets that you'll be able to use in the full game when it launches. So I just think while it's not like a full game, I think it's a really cool way to educate your player base and bring them into your project.
Ian, thoughts?
Yeah, my app of the week is called Warren Stole My App. This new one.
Ian is our game lead, our UA lead on Arrivant. So I knew he'd be mad I stole that one.
No, it's all good. A great call out. And yeah, I've been super excited to test that one out myself. I'll pivot to my app of the week. I was on the fence here, but I'm just going to go with, when I'm a 33-year-old super old man, and so I'll need to put the heating pad on my back and just kick back and let my back relax. And so while I'm doing that, I need a Zen game to be playing while I'm doing that. So Mini Motorways has been my go-to recently. On a few of the challenges there, I have a top 5 score. So holler at me if you want to do some Mini Motorways competition.
Mini Motorways, very, very good game. Also part of Apple Arcade. So if you have Apple Arcade, you can play Mini Motorways. Kevin,
also on Steam, so you can play it on Tesla soon.
Yeah, there you go. Look at that. Callback. Kevin, do you got an app this week?
Yeah, I've been getting deep into music production on my side. A friend recommended me this app. It's called Oxy Studio, and it's pretty much like only making EDM, and it's not really something I listen to a lot of, but it's just a very fun thing to mess around with. You have all these different sounds, and you basically create loops that you can stack on top of each other. They have a couple of samples, but it's really cool. For the same instrument, you can create multiple different loops. So you can have like a build up and then like a chorus, and you toggle those, and it smartly switches every few 4 or 8 counts. I think it's really fun. If you've like never really done music production, it's very easy. And even if you have, I think there's plenty of space to explore in there. So just a non-gaming sort of app that I've been going deep into.
Sweet. That's a good one. Is it mobile only?
Don't know if it's mobile only, but I think it's.
Do you use it on mobile?
Yeah, I use it on mobile. I also don't know if it's iOS only. Okay. I do have iOS, so somebody will have to check me on that.
Cool. My app this week, as always, I have the most boomer apps of the week. And so my app this week is Hearthstone. And the reason for that is I was, well, I was out in the woods in Mendocino. I didn't have a gaming rig, and after spending like 4 days stomping around the woods, I wanted to sit back and play some video games. And so I already had Hearthstone down on my phone and whipped it up and started playing Hearthstone with my old deck that got me to Legend like 10 years ago. And it still works. Still playing news.
Still works.
Still a great game. Yeah.
That means they got some good balance.
Well, it's like they're like a wild, which is like their extended format. But yeah, still playing noobs at silver tier and wild. We'll see how high I can go. Cool. Well, thank you guys all for joining us. A little bit of a different episode, but I actually thought it went really, really well. Warren, take us out because we know where to find these guys.
Ian, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. It's so cool to have you guys on. You guys hear from Xander and I a lot, but our team members like Ian, like Kevin, and the rest of our great UA, creative, data, and engineering teams at Upptic are really the ones that make all the magic happen. They're the ones that drive all the growth for the gaming studios that we support. So really appreciate your time today. And for any of you in the game development business out there, if you would like to work with wonderful people like Ian and Kevin to grow your game, here at Upptic, we provide everything from the cross-disciplinary people in UA, data, and creative to all of the tool sets, including our pretty cool SKAN buying methodology that we referred to today. So that's a lot of shilling. If you want to know more, go to upptic.com. That's upptic.com.
Awesome. Talk soon.